Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Ches in Bab Mציעא. As we learn from Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Sunnah Masar Shivya. We're about the seventh line down on the page. Amarami Barchama. Now, let's understand something. Our mission, until now, we've been talking about two guys are fighting over something, right? I bought it, I picked it up, I bought it, you're fighting. It's also possible that two people were cooperating. They were picking something up together. Let me explain. If one person picks up something, he finds something on the street. I see a blanket or a talus on the street, and I pick up half of it. That's not picking it up. To be Kona, I got to pick it all up. You can't pick up half of it. That doesn't count. Rashi on tomorrow's daf says it. It's clear from today's daf also, Rashi, but Rashi says it clearly in tomorrow's daf. He says, if the other side that's still on the ground, hefker lo kani adakar kula. You can't pick up. You're not kona something from hefker until you pick up the whole thing. So that's very clear. You have to pick up the whole thing. But let's say two people were cooperating. They picked it up together. Now, how does that work? They picked it up together, and they were planning on sharing it, right? So that could work. That could work, l'chora. So Rav Meir Shapiro says zosomeres. How do we see zosomeres from our Mishnah? Our Mishnah is talking about a different case. Our Mishnah is talking about each guy picked it up for himself, right? Meant to pick it up for himself, and we weren't there. We don't see it. We don't have any proof. But each guy says, I picked it up, and he grabbed it from me. I picked up the whole thing. He grabbed it from me. That's a Mishnah is a different case. But he wants to see from our Mishnah, and it's not at all clear how you see that from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is talking about each guy picked it up for himself. Here we're talking about if two guys picked it up together, each planning to pick it up for himself and for the other guy. Because I only picked up one side. The other guy picked up the other side. If I pick up my side, that's nothing. He has to pick up his side. So Rav Meir Shapiro says an interesting halacha. Zosomer, this is going to be discussed for the next couple of days because there's going to be other opinions. Rav Meir Shapiro, Zosomeris, again, not clear how you see from our Mishnah, but he says, can I pick up something for you? I see an item on the street. I say, oh, you know what? There's a nice satchel on the street. I know you're looking for a satchel. I'll pick it up for you. Can I be kona? Rav Meir Shapiro says you can. I can pick it up for you on your behalf. We'll see if there's other opinions. Other opinions say no. Just like, let's say, I know that Yankel owes several people money, and I find some money on the street, and I'll pick it up for him. Pick it up on behalf of, he has creditors number 1, 2, and 3. I'm picking it up for number 1. Number 1's a friend of mine. Can I pick it up for him and not for number 2 and number 3? There's another opinion that says, no, you can't. Because since I can't pick up something, if I pick it up for number 1, it's causing 2 and 3 to have a loss because they can't get it now. So just like when I'm zocha something, I acquire it for one person where it's a chov for somebody else, it's an obligation for them because they're losing out. Maybe that doesn't work. Rav Meir Shapiro says it does work. If the other guy is not, if I pick up something for you and it doesn't work, in other words, when two people, again, it's hard to fathom this because it's not what our mission is talking about. Where each guy picked it up for himself, and he says the other guy stole it from me, right? That I picked it up first, and there's a fight about it. Here we're talking about where each person picked it up together, and I need his cooperation. And Rav Meir Shapiro says, you see from here that I could pick up something for you. When I picked up my half, don't forget, it's not like at the end, like we saw at the end yesterday's stuff. It's not like two people came up towels, okay, we're going to cut it down the middle. You sell it, you split it. You pick up the whole thing for the other guy. So that's effectively what we say here too. I picked it up for you. We pick it up together. We want it to work in whichever way it works. Meaning, if I just pick up my side, I didn't pick it up. If you just pick up your side, you didn't pick it up. But if my picking it up can work for you, I'm picking up my side for me and for you, and you're picking up your side for me and for you. Because if I pick up my side for me, and you don't pick up your side for me, then the other half, your side is still on the ground as far as I'm concerned. If you didn't pick it up for me, then it's just like it's still on the ground. And I can't pick up half an item. It's got to be all picked up or it doesn't work. So he said, it works. Each side is like it's sitting on the ground. If I can only pick it up for me and not for you, well, I only picked up one half. You only picked up one half. Neither of us picked up anything. Neither one will pick it up. Now, again, the Zosomeris, how do you see that from our Mishnah? We don't see that at this point. The Gemara is going to say later on It's from the extra words in the Mishnah. But we don't see it, but that's his point, that I could be kona something for you, and you could be kona something for me. Because otherwise, when two people cooperatively pick up an item, you one side, one the other side, if it doesn't work, you're picking your side up for me, and I'm picking up my side for you as well as for me. It wouldn't. Neither one picked it up. Rava says he disputes this. No. Rava says no. Maybe if I just pick up something solely for you, and you pick up something solely for me, it doesn't work because, like you say, if I pick it up for you, then I'm causing other people to lose out on it. Maybe that doesn't work. The reason it works in this case, where you're picking up a talus together, since I could be kona for myself, I could be kona for you too. I'm picking up my side for me and for you, and you're picking up your side for me and for you. Maybe that's what's Taita. If I send you to steal for me, what's the rule? If I send you something, doesn't it's not shayach to me. You stole for yourself. You shouldn't listen to me. You're putter. Why? Because I didn't do anything. Say beganav li, ganav putter. Still should finish a ganvu, right? In other words, you can't acquire something from you can't steal on my behalf. If I send you to steal, you didn't steal from me, you stole for yourself. But yet, let's say Shutfin stole something together, and one of the two Shutfin actually picked it up and took it out of the Nigzal's Rishus. Shutfin Shaganu Chayav, and they're Chayav. My time, since the one should have acquired for himself, he could acquire for the other guy too. It's a little bit of a stretch, but he says, you see that if I send you to do something totally for me, in other words, to acquire it for me, that doesn't work. But if you acquired it for yourself and for me, that does work. Shma mina, that's Rava's point. So Rava says, you don't see that I could acquire something totally for you, or you could acquire something for me. If I could acquire for myself, I can acquire for you too. Amar Rava. So now Rava takes it another step. Hashad Amrit. Now that we say what? That what? That since I acquired for myself, I could acquire it for you too. So what about cherish pikech? Now the rule is a cherish, a person who's deaf and dumb, a deaf mute, has no kinyan. He's like cherish. Let's say cherish otabakot. However, the rabbis made a takana that in order that people shouldn't take advantage of him, if he picks up something, it's his, even though he can't really make a kinyan. Okay, but he can't acquire it for me. Could acquire some view. What about a cherish and pikech? Two people, one's cherish, one's pikech, picked up something. She'd be a mציעא. And they both want to cooperate. We're not talking about our Mishnah. We're talking about where they cooperate. Each pick up the other side. He talks about since the cherish is quota for himself, kind of pikech. The pikech could also acquire it. Now, since he has ability to acquire it for himself, says the Rabbanan, so therefore he acquires it for him and for the pikech. So what kind of sense does that make? The reason why the pikech, the reason why the cherish acquires his half is because why? Because the cherish acquires his half because the pikech picked up the pikech's half both for the pikech and for him and for the cherish. So it makes sense. And as the cherish can acquire, the cherish acquires his side, right? Why does he get his side? Because the rabbi said he can acquire something, right? But yet he didn't pick up the pikech side, but the pikech picked it up for him and for himself and for the cherish. So we understand how the cherish, how does the pikech acquire? The pikech only picked up one half. The other half was picked up by the cherish, and the cherish doesn't have the mind to pick it up for the pikech. Doesn't necessarily not really literally the mind. You think every time you have two idiots in the street, they're thinking all these things. I'm picking up for myself and for you. It's understood that they're picking it up whichever way they're going to make the kinyan. But the way they're going to make the kinyan is that it's going to work both. The Rabbanim didn't give a cherish an ability to. He's a cherish of a cotton. He has no ability to acquire things. For his own stuff, the rabbi said, okay, he can pick it up for himself. We don't want any fights. We don't want somebody else to take away from him. Fine. So the rabbis made him a special takana. But he can't pick it up for the pikech. So how did the pikech kona? The reason we're saying it works is because each side picks up for himself and for the other guy. So the pikech could pick it up for himself and for the cherish. Fine. So that's how the cherish acquires it, right? Because the cherish gets his side because his own side he picked up for himself, and the pikech also picked up the other side for him. But how does the pikech acquire the side that the cherish picked up? He can't get there. The cherish can't pick it up for himself. So we'll see. We'll see. So they didn't go that far. Okay, right. Ela pikech maikana. Ela ema cherish kana pikech lo kana. So we want to say in that case, maybe the cherish will acquire it because his own side is getting from the takanas chachamim, and the Bikech is picking up fair for him, and the Bikech doesn't acquire it. So my migu, what's the migu? Rava said, because of this, Tashta migu will say that the Bikech doesn't get it, and the migu and the Cherish does. So what's the migu? Migu to Shtei Cherish and Be'alma. Two Cherish and pick it up in general. The rabbi said they acquire it together because they're takana. Hainami kani. He must haimai. How can you compare the two? If he says that hani milech de kamag bele adai to the chavrei. When the Bikech picks up something for himself and for the other guy, that will work. But over here, the Bikech is effectively only picking it up for himself because the Cherish is not picking it up for him. So he's only picking it up for himself. He's not going to pick it, he's not getting it for the other guy. If the Bikech cannot acquire it in this case, you're saying, well, the Cherish it works because the Bikech picks it up for him, and the Cherish gets his own because of the Tkanas Chachamim. But the Bikech wouldn't work. But if the Bikech can't acquire it in this case, why? Because he's only picking it up half, so he's not picking up anything. So he's trying to pick it up for himself, and he can't even do that. So how could he be mocked to somebody else? That's Rava's point. According to Rav Meir it would work, but not according to Rava. So Hayadait again. Here it's even if you say it's like even if you say Tim Salam, Rashi says even if you say pick it up for somebody else, that's only when he's picking it up for himself and for somebody else. Here he can't even do it for himself, so to speak. It doesn't work either way. If the Bikech cannot acquire it for the Cherish because he can't acquire it for himself either, why? Because the Cherish is not picking it up for him. So neither one is caught up. How is it different than two Cherish and Alma who could pick up something? They shouldn't fight with other people. So the rabbi said, you know what? Let him have it, even though it's not a proper kinyan. But over here, even the Cherish will not acquire. Why would the Cherish get half? If the Bikech is not acquired, at least he's smart enough to understand that. You know, if the Bikech can't get it, doesn't acquire at all. What I acquired, so he sort of like waives his right in it because he says if the other guy can't acquire it, I can't acquire it either. Okay, so this whole machlokas here, so far it's a slight machlokas. Rav Meir Shapiro says, and that's apparently how we paskin. Rava said that's only when you could acquire. If you acquire for yourself, you can also acquire for the other one. But again, we're talking about where two people cooperated. Two people picked it up together, and we say again, if my picking up doesn't work for you, you didn't pick up anything because my half's on the ground. And if your half does, if I can't acquire it for you, so you didn't pick up my half. So it only works because each one effectively picks it up for himself and for the other guy. So you see, according to Rav at least, Rav Meir says I can pick it up totally for you. Rav says that only works if I pick it up for myself and for you. But where do you see this whole idea? Where do you see this from our Mishnah? Zos Someros we started with. So the Gemara says, right, Ravashi in the third of the wide lines. Where did Rav Meir get this from? Zos Someros, you see, what our Mishnah? Our Mishnah is not talking about where they cooperated. They were fighting in our Mishnah. What's going on? They're finding so each one says it's all mine, and I picked it up. I picked up the whole thing myself, and this guy came and grabbed it away. That's not a cooperation case. Maybe it's from the second phrase. Each one says it's all mine, and we said, isn't that redundant? But we explained that. What do you need that for? Elamai, you say from the extra words, maybe that's what it means. Even though that's not the most of the words. Kula shli is not cooperation. You say, but the extra word which Gemara understands right away. That's a non-starter because we've already explained what the kula shli is. Remember, when each one said ana matzasiya, that means I picked it up. And what's kula shli? That's a different case. Where each guy says I bought it. Remember, two guys gave money to the seller. One guy voluntarily, and the other guy forced the money on him. So we already explained. We said that case of and they're fighting. He said, remember if one guy says it's all mine, one guy says half is mine. So on one half, he waives his right? 50% he gives away right away. And they're only fighting about the other 50%. Hustle, what do I need it for? What's the chiddush in that? Obviously, if I gave away 50%, the fight's only on the other 50%. So we swear, one guy swears that I don't have less than 3/4, the other guy says I don't have less than 1/4, etc. El Mishnah Seir from the extra lashon. What is the chiddush in that? Shema mina, maybe it's okay. That's what Rav Meir Shapiro would die. How do you know we're talking about Mציעא? Maybe that's also speaking about where I bought the whole thing, or one guy said I bought the whole thing, one guy says I bought half. But he what's the chiddush? I might think that the one who says it's only half mine, he, so to speak, it's like returning a lost item. Remember returning a lost item? If I find a wallet in the street and I come in and I say, give it to somebody, and he says, hey, there was $100 in there. There's only 50 now, and and I say, no, I didn't take any more than I didn't take anything out of there. I'm motivated. There's 50 in there or whatever. It's Meishav Aveda enough to make a shvua. I'm returning an item, otherwise nobody will return anything. So maybe by saying Chetzer Shali, I'm like Meishav Aveda, and I shouldn't have to make a shvua. Li Potter, Kamash Mulan, the high room. No, the guy is just making a ruse. So if I say the whole thing is mine, then I'll have to swear. I'll say half is mine. So I'll be like a Meishav Aveda, and I'll be put to make a shvua. So maybe that's the chiddush of Zer Mekul Shli v'Zer Mechetzer Shali. So again, how do you know this idea? Ela Meha from the end, for a further case in the Mishnah. Two guys were riding on an animal. That's going to be discussion on tomorrow's daf. Before we get back into that Ram Chama says that works, and Rava qualifies it. And on Shabbos' daf, we'll see that there's a machlokas about that. Rav Nachman and others say no. But meanwhile, we bring up this idea of Shnayim Rochon Agavehema, right? But that's the Mishnah says two guys are riding on an animal, right? Each guy says, I found it, it's mine. Hasulam, what in that case? What's the mistake? An animal and talis, all the same. El Mishnah you say, maybe you see it from there. These extra words, what is it teaching me that? It's hard to extrapolate that. Rambam says those extra words are teaching me that I could pick up something from somebody else, even though the Mishnah is talking about where they're fighting. Says B'dilma Kamashma on the Rochev Namikani. Maybe it's chiddush is that rochev, that riding on a horse or riding on any animal is a kinyan, even though I didn't cause it to move. Normally, how do you cause an animal? How do you acquire an animal? If it's an elephant, pardon? You pull it. Good, mashicha. If it's a large animal that you can't pull, like an elephant or something like that, handing over the reins, some act of ownership. Pulling it is an act of pulling it, meaning you cause it to move a foreleg and a hind leg. That's a kinyan. What about if I'm just sitting on the animal? That's like riding on the animal. I didn't cause it to move at all. So maybe the commercial, maybe the chiddush over there. That's the chiddush. Rafakani. Rashi says 4 lines from down a page. Afagav the low mishichi. Even though that's not pulling. Shein is asam koma. Shein medic bragav. I'm not kicking it. I'm not kicking it. What are those things called? The spurs that the cowboys used to wear. I didn't. I guess this to spur it on. Is that what? That's how it comes from, right? What came first, the noun or the verb? I don't know. Michael will figure it out. But the point is that I'm maybe that's a chiddush. Just sitting on it, that's a chiddush. It's talis. We don't see that. Pardon?
What does rocha mean? We get the sitting.
Rocha means I'm riding on a horse. Yeah, riding means I can be
sitting.
That is sit. Rochev is sitting on the horse.
You're riding.
Okay, the same thing. Same thing. We're saying the same thing now. Okay.
It says
Rochev. What does that mean?
You're riding.
You're sitting on the horse. You're sitting on the horse. They're sitting on the horse. Sitting on the horse does not necessarily mean you moved it. That's a chiddush. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Let's say I'm sitting in a wagon being drawn by the horse. We'll see. So that's a chiddush. You're right. There is a difference between Rochev and Yoshev. You remember something from 15 years ago. There is a difference. We're going to talk about that. But here the point is that Rochev is like Yoshev. The point is that even if I'm sitting on it and I didn't cause it to move, I'm riding on it, right? You could understand, like, let's say somebody else is pulling it. Like, you go to a pony, kids have a pony. The kids don't cause the animal to move. The guy pulling it is causing it to move. They're just sitting on it. That's Rochev. He's riding on the horse. Sitting and riding can be the same thing. That's what we're saying over here. The chiddush is Rochev. So there's the chiddush there. So again, where do you get this idea that the Sefer says if they're both moded to one another, if there's proof, you got proof. That's it. You got proof. They split it without a shvur. In other words, if they're both moded, that they picked it up together, right, or that they acquired it together. But you split us from what are we talking about? If two guys bought something together, right? And they say, yeah, we each gave money for it. And they're moda, yeah, okay, we'll split it, right? Is what's the chiddush yet? Elav Mציעא. That's because that whole thing is extra. If two guys are moda, if they're moda that they have bought it together or picked it up together, whatever, okay, what do you mean they're both moda? You see from here, and you see from over here, Elav Mציעא. Talking about finding something. In other words, you see, if two guys are moda, that means that they agree, they picked it up together effectively. It's not even from the extra lashon. We're talking about if it's mekach, they bought something together. Of course, you split it without a shvur. They each agreed that they paid money for it. There's no fight about that. Of course, what's the chiddush is mציעא, that if they picked it up together, the chiddush is when I picked up something. What do you mean? I picked up half and you picked up half, so neither one of us picked it up. The answer is, if I pick it up for you, I'm also kona. Rava says that's only it only works because I picked it up for myself. But if I pick up an item in the street for you, Rava would say, like Rav Nachman's going to say in Daf Yomi, I'm not kona. I'm not kona because I picked it up for you. Somebody else was trying to get it too. Somebody saw a wallet on the street. A bunch of guys ran for it, and I'm picking up for you. Why should I pick up for you? He wants to pick it up for him. That's what Rav Nachman learns. Okay, we'll see that on Daf Yomi. Let's go. We're on the last line on the page. Two guys riding on a horse. I'm Rav Yosef. I'm Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda told me, Shmuel. You see from Shmuel, right? Now, what he says, I'm Rav Yehuda. I've heard from Shmuel, meaning Rav Yehuda, not Rebbe Yehuda Nasi. Rav Yehuda was an Amora. We have many times the Gemara. Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. We have Rav Yehuda, Rav. When Rav died, he went to learn in Shmuel's yeshiva. So we always have Rav Yehuda was a Talmud of Shmuel. So I heard from Shmuel two things. I heard Rachav Umanik. I heard him talk about riding and leading a horse. Leading meaning you're pulling it, right? Chad one works, one doesn't work. I don't know which one. I don't know which one's which. One of them works, one of them doesn't work. So the Gemara says, if we're talking about simply riding and alone and leading alone, does anybody says that leading an animal doesn't work? You just said that leading an animal, that means making him walk, right? Being moshech works either way. Is definitely a kinyan. So how could there be a question? He says, I heard from him, Rachav, riding and leading, one works, one doesn't work. Well, if we're talking about riding alone and leading alone, of course leading works. If anybody says leading doesn't work, leading works. Leading doesn't necessarily, by the way, Mashiach works either by pulling it or by hitting it and causing it to move or by calling to it. Here, Fido, here you go. That's also a kinyan, right? Right? That's also works, right? Mashiach works both ways, either by I cause it to move, either by pulling it, hitting it, calling to it, works either way, right? Okay? That's what he says. First Shlomo says on Mashcheni acharecha narutza, right? In Shiur Mashcheni acharecha narutza. He says, Baruch pull us to you, but please do it when you call to us nicely, not by hitting us and forcing us, hurting us. Understand? And Mashcheni, how? Mashcheni acharecha narutza. We should run to you by you calling to us, not by hurting us. Anyway, the point is that Mashiach definitely works, and that's Manik was when Shmuel had I heard from Shmuel, Rachav one works and one doesn't work. It can't be simply Rachav versus simply Manik, because everybody says Manik works. That's Mashiach, so it must be Rachav is the one that doesn't work. So how could there be a question? How could Rav Yehuda said, I heard from Shmuel, Rachav and Manik, one works, one doesn't work. There's no question about that. Certainly, if it's alone, Rachav is the one that doesn't work. If you say one doesn't work or that one possibly doesn't work, Rachav hu de iklamem, right? I'm sorry, that's all part of the same thing. If you say it's Rachav alone versus Manik alone, Manik definitely works. So if you're going to say one doesn't work, Rachav is the one that doesn't work. So that can't be the question because it would be too obvious. Here's the question. One guy is riding on it and one guy is leading it. And the question is, Rachav, do you say Rachav, he's holding on to it? When you're riding, you're holding on to it. Like you say, maybe it's more than sitting, you're actually holding on to it. Or do you say, no, leading is more, because the animal's going because of you. You're pulling it, you're pushing it, you're causing it to move. Which one is better? Maybe that's his question. When they're both there, right? Both of them could work alone. But when they're there together, which is the stronger kinyan? Which works? Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, Amali Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda told me when he had this question, he told me, Nechsa, and let's analyze it. The Tanan, Hamanik Sopik is a bomb. If you're not allowed to have, you're not allowed to what Klayim is not only when you plant things together, also if you lead two kinds of animals together, right? Even a chicken and a donkey, you're not allowed to have two animals, under the same yoke for you, right? That's an isser. So a manik, if you lead two different species of animals together, that's called, Klayim, right? Kalai behema. So the kind of manik sofik esarbon, you get malchus for that. The hayoshi bakar and also sofik esarbon. If you're sitting in a wagon that's being led by two animals, two different species of animals, you also get malchus. Rav Meir poter as a yoshi bakar. Meir says the one who's sitting in the wagon didn't do anything, and he's poter. Midap of Shmuel. Now Shmuel turned the shitas around. He says that Rav Meir is the one that says you're chayiv, even you're sitting in there, and the Rabbanim say you're poter. But Tani, he says, you see that riding alone, again, Irving, he's saying that Rochav is like sitting at this point, right? Rochav alone, he says, why? Because he says the Rabbanim say that if you're sitting in a wagon being led, just sitting, riding or sitting, doesn't do anything. You see, it doesn't do anything because you're not chayiv in that case. So you didn't really do anything. Because Rachav makamanik. See, if Rachav alone doesn't work because you're sitting in the wagon, it's not mechayiv you, and therefore you're not doing anything. So certainly Rachav makamanik wouldn't work. That's what he wants to analyze it. Amalei Abayim. Okay. Oh, because you're seeing that it doesn't accomplish anything. You're right. We'll see. It doesn't accomplish anything. Since it doesn't accomplish anything, he says. So he says, it's nothing. Sitting doesn't do anything. That's why he sort of turned it around. He said, that doesn't do anything. The Chachamim say, right? He says, the Chachamim say you're potter. That means that riding doesn't do anything. And if riding doesn't do anything alone, it certainly doesn't do anything. But if one guy's riding and the other guy's leading, it certainly, even riding alone wouldn't do anything. So riding Machamam doesn't do anything. Okay, now you could ask, what about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah said one guy was riding and he gets a kinyan. We'll come to that. Amalei Abai Rav Yosef Hazimnan Sagi, and I understand. Abai says to Rav Yosef said that Rav Yehuda said, let's analyze it. So, and he gave him this example from the case of the Kalai Behema. So Abai said to Rav Yosef Hazimnan Sagi, many times you told this idea of Nechse and Andalam. You didn't say anything in the name of Rav Yehuda. Why all of a sudden you're quoting Rav Yehuda? Amalei Ivra, you're right. The truth is it was Rav Yehuda. And I also remember the Amile that I said to him, Hechi Poshit Ma Rachav Miyoshev. Irving's question: How do you decide a question about Rachav Yoshev? Yoshev lo tafas Mosera, and the Yoshev when he is sitting in the wagon, he's not holding on to the reins. Rachav tafas Mosera. When you're riding, you're holding on to the reins. There's a difference between just sitting versus riding. Riding means you're holding on to the reins. How could you decide one from another? How could you say over here, Rachav doesn't do anything, and therefore certainly Rachav Makamanik doesn't do anything. Rachav is not the same as sitting. You're just proving something from sitting. Amrli, and he answered me. In other words, I said this to Rabbi Yehuda, and he answered me, Rav Shmuel Damar Tavayu, both my rabbis. Rav Shmuel said, Moseir lo kani. Listen to this, that holding on to the reins by itself doesn't do anything. Now, that means when you're talking about finding something or acquiring something, that doesn't do anything. Okay, well, what does that mean? We'll see where Moseir does work. We just said before, how do I hand over an elephant if I sell you my elephant? Handing over the reins. So what do you mean about Kani? So we'll see. Talking about when you're acquiring it from Hefker where nobody's giving it to you. Economy. So before we get to that whole discussion, the Gemara says, well, somehow the dialogue was different. Economy, Amalei by Rabbi Yosef, that it wasn't that Rabbi Yosef said, Rabbi Yehuda told us to analyze it this way. It was Rabbi Yosef who analyzed it and brought the case of sitting in the wagon with two different species of animals. So Abai said to Rabbi Yosef, in other words, it wasn't that Rashi in the first of the wide line says Rabbi Yosef Shmeid Nafshei Kamer Nechsenan. He didn't say the name of Rabbi Yehuda. He said it. So Abai said to him, what do you bring me a proof from sitting in a wagon? Yosef, he's not holding on to the reins. Rachav here, he's holding on to the reins, and therefore you'd be therefore that's more of a kinyan. We're trying to prove what's the story with Rochev, or certainly Manig alone works, right? We're not sure apparently, and it can't be that Rochev alone wouldn't. If it would be that he said one of them works and one of them doesn't work, and it can't be that Manig doesn't work. Manig for sure works, so then it would be Rochev doesn't work, and then he wouldn't have a question about which one works. The question is when you have Rochev and Manig, apparently they both would work, but alone. The question is which one's stronger. when you have them both? Do you say Rachav is better because he's grabbing on to something? Or do you say Manig is better because he's leading the animal? Okay, so he tried to be posher from the case of sitting in the wagon. So Abai said to Rav Yosef, either about in the first year, so he said, how did Rav Yehuda say that? Now he's saying, how did you say that? Rav Yosef himself brought the right from sitting in the wagon. He said, how can you compare one to the other? Moseira, you're holding on to the reins, or Rocheb, you're holding on to the reins. Yosef, you're not holding on to it. Amalei Hachitani Idi. So now he quotes it not in the name of Rav and Shmuel, but Idi was like a Chacham, a Tana, Chacham or Idi, or maybe it's just a Chacham. Moseira lo Kani. Itmanami, Amar of Chelba, Amar of Huna. Listen carefully. Moseira Mechaveiro Kana. If I get the reins from you, meaning I bought it from you, you gave it to me, I'm acquiring it from you, that works. But when I have to acquire it on my own, nobody's giving it to me. Either a ger died and he has no yorship, or I find it in the street. That's not a kinyan. Why? Because the whole idea of Moseira, the word rain is my lashon Moseira, means rains. Idi Asbali, the same Moseira means I'm giving it over from you to one. That means that the definition of rains is that somebody's handing it over. And again, how does we explain this many times? How does kinyan work? Kinyan all works with my das. If I give you my talis and sell you my talis, it's because I want to give it to you, right? But you have to make it what they call a symbolic kinyan. Could you say, can you come over and just steal my talis and say you made a kinyan on it? Agba, whatever, Masir, whatever. Doesn't work that way. It works only with my das. So again, Moseira works. When does a rain handing over the rain? When somebody is giving it to you. So that force of the giver, the donor, is causing you to acquire it, and you make a kinyan by handing it over one to another. But if you're picking it up where nobody's giving it to you, it doesn't work. So therefore, he's saying that even though logically you could say, yes, sitting in the wagon is not the same as riding. Riding, you're doing more, but no, it doesn't really make any difference. If you're kicking the animals, we'll see. If you're kicking it with your spurs, then you're causing it to move. That's no different than calling it or pulling it or pushing it or whatever. Amarava. Yeah, so Amarava, he doesn't give him. So Bishlam Mechaveiro Kani, why you acquired the Kamasle Chabe? Because he's giving it to you. It's his das to give it to you, and he's handing out elements. He's Again, who's giving it to Likta, who's giving it to you. You can't be Conan. Okay, so have we been poshet the Shaila? The Chara he has been poshet the Shaila. The Rachav b'Makam Manik is not as good, right? Because he says that according to Rabbanan, if I'm just sitting in a wagon, sitting it, not causing the animals to move, but I'm sitting is like riding. There's no difference if I'm holding on to the rein or not holding on to the rein, or just sitting there. It's the same thing. Holding on to the rein does not give me a kinyan. That doesn't do anything. Holding on to the rein doesn't do anything. Yes, when it comes to a kinyan, handing over an elephant or handing something over, yes, then the other person's giving it to me. But just holding on to the rein is no different halachically than sitting. Meisvei, what do you mean our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says the Rachav does make a difference. To be riding money. Now, who does our Mishnah go? What does he say? Two guys were riding on an animal. Again, what does it say? Each guy says, it's mine, right? Mishnah said, two guys riding on an animal, or one was riding and one was leading. They all swear and they split it the same way. Now, what's going on over there? Rav Meir, if it goes like Rav Meir, who said what? That in the case of sitting in a wagon, you're chayiv, right? Whether it's two different animals. Ashta Yoshev Kani Rachmi boy. Is there any question? According to Rav Meir, who says sitting in a wagon led by two different species of animals is machayiv you malchus, because it's like you're over on that lav. So just sitting in it. So certainly Rachiv is doing something, riding on the horses together. What's the chiddush in the Mishnah? We already know Shnai Melchus and Batalis. What's the chiddush over here? Oh, we said on Amar Aleph. Oh, you know what the chiddush is over there? It's Rachiv. What do you mean Rachiv? If Yoshev is a kinyan, so certainly Rachiv, there's no question there. It's logically Rachiv is more, right? But you can argue technically, logically, riding is more, holding on to the reins, but it doesn't do much for a kinyan, right? But it's certainly more if Yoshev works. Rachmi boy. So what's the chiddush in the Mishnah? What does he tell me? You acquire it that way? Even according to Rav Meir, you don't need the Mishnah. El lav Rabbanim. It must be like the Rabbanim who say what? That Yoshev doesn't do anything, but Rachav does. B'shmami no Rachav kani. So you see over here, the Rachav does acquire something. Not like you want to say Rachav doesn't do anything. And the Rachav does work. That's what Chiddush Rabbanim says. Rashi alav Rabbanim Ashmina to be Yosef Huda Potter. By Yosef, you're sitting away, doesn't have a Rachav low. We took to Rav Yehuda the Pasha Rachav Yosef. Rav Yehuda said that Rochev is like Yosef because the holding on to reins doesn't do anything. In our Mishnah, you see that Rochev does do something. And it can't be Rav Meir, because what would you need the Mishnah for? Rav Meir says Yosef works, certainly Rochev. Elamai must be like the Rabbanim, who say Yosef doesn't work, and yet Rochev does. So you see, Rochev does work, and therefore he wasn't poshit the Shaila correctly. Rav Yehuda was poshit the Shaila that Rochev doesn't do anything. Yosef Makamani doesn't. Here you see, one is riding and one is leading, and Rochev does work. He does split it. You see, Rochev does work. Over here, this riding is with the spurs. This riding is not just sitting on and holding the animals. This is where you're kicking it. That's different. So that's the same as manik. What's the point? You say if one's riding and one's leading. They're both manik. Trey gavni manik. There are two different kinds of manik. Now the same a rachav arach. I might think the rachav is better than manik alone. The manik v'tafasba, because there's two things over here. When you're riding it and spurring it on, you're doing both. More the guy who's leading it is causing it to move, but the guy who's riding it and kicking it is doing both. He's holding on to it. Kamashma, they're both the same. They're just two different kinds of manik. That's manik. So rachiv means sitting on the animal, even holding on to the reins, which may not do much, may not do more than Yosef. But when you're riding and you're kicking it and you're causing it to move, that's certainly like Mashiach, pulling it and causing it on. Oh, we'll pick it up from Tashma, the last two lines tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.
These are all, or whatever it is. It's evidence that both parties want to try